So we've got the curious case of the Russian 10-year-old boy who claimed to be from Mars, and he was talking about how they breathed. They used to breathe high CO2, carbon dioxide atmosphere of like 90% plus. And after 32 years in this high CO2 atmosphere, it led to him becoming immortal. So the question is, that is obviously impossible, surely. There is no link between carbon dioxide and longevity, age. But we found some data from the EU and Britain, and we looked at the CO2 levels, and we looked at the average age going back in time to at least the last 100 years. So when the CO2 level was 280 parts per million, the average age was about 30 years. When it was 320 parts per million, the average age was about 43 years. When the CO2 level was 380 parts per million, the average age was about 65 years. And when it gets to 395 parts per million, the average age was about 72 years. And then in more recent times, you've got the CO2 carbon dioxide level at 420 parts per million, 84 years, which is, good average age. And then you've got 445 parts per million, 96 years. So those people who do survive into old age often do live till either 84 or 96. And they are often, the current parts per million is about 440. So people who do tend to live into the 90s will tend to live to about that average kind of age. There's a lot more people living to 100 and 110. But we noticed that on average, for every 25 parts per million increase in CO2 gives about 12 extra years of life. So if you double it, you've got for every 50 parts per million increase in the atmospheric carbon dioxide seems to give 24 extra years of life. So if we just times it by 1,000 on each side, because we've obviously got an equation here, 50x equals 24y. If x is the CO2 level and y is the years. So we've got this little equation that we can plot on a graph. So for every 50,000 parts per million in CO2, that should give 24,000 extra years. And if you go to the 20% level, which would be 200,000 parts per million of CO2, which would be about 20% of the atmosphere, just like oxygen is like 23%, and it's 230,000 parts per million. That would give, timesing it by 4, 96,000 extra years. And it's funny that the Sumerian kings lists, the Sumerian kings that were listed had ages between like 50,000 and 100,000 years, which many people thought was impossible. But this small data sample does seem to suggest that actually, if they lived in a higher CO2 atmosphere, then it could be possible to live between 50,000 and 100,000 years if you were living in a higher CO2 atmosphere. So the data suggests, even though it's a small sample, it is quite predictable. And also there's a correlation between CO2 and height. And as I said before, once you get to sort of 445 parts per million or 450 parts per million CO2, you'll be seeing people at 7 feet tall. And it's ironically, but it was in the paper, wasn't it, that some celebrity woman was going out with a Russian guy who was 7 feet tall. So it shows that there are correlations between CO2 level and age, longevity, and also height. And we know this from plants, that plants grow taller and the fruits grow bigger in a higher CO2 atmospheres of in greenhouses of 800 parts per million and 1200 parts per million really do enhance the plant's heights and the size of the fruits. So, is immortality impossible? I don't think so. I think there is a link between CO2, carbon dioxide, and longevity. And I think in the future, if we keep on increasing our CO2 levels, we'll see people well over 7 feet tall who live for about 120 to 150 years. And that'll add even more evidence to this small data sample. And this is how we go about proving or testing whether something's impossible or not. Pretty simple. Just look for the pattern in the numbers.